Aloha, and welcome to another episode of Hangin' at the Reef, the podcast where we immerse ourselves in a sea of knowledge and discover the vibrant world around us with experts who are making a splash. I'm your host, Jeffrey Rich, and today we have a special trio of guests wanting to share more about HPU's updated Master of Arts in Diplomacy and Global Security. First, we have Dr. Russell Hart, a historian with a PhD from Ohio State University. He is the author of several works, including Clash of Arms, How the Allies Won Normandy, 1944, and Guderian, Panzer Pioneer or Mythmaker. Dr. Hart teaches a range of courses in U.S. military history, and his research interests encompass military studies as well as the study of genocide. Next, we welcome Dr. Andrea Malji, an associate professor of international studies at Hawaii Pacific University and the chair of the History, Humanities, and International Studies Department. She holds a PhD in political science from the University of Kentucky and has published extensively on peace, religion, and security in South Asia. She has a book on religious nationalism in contemporary South Asia, published through Cambridge University Press. Dr. Malji is a Fulbright Nehru Scholar and was named HPU's Teacher of the Year in 2021. Finally, we have Dr. Jon Davidann, a professor of history and former chair of the History, Humanities, and International Studies Department at HPU. With a PhD from the University of Minnesota, Dr. Davidann has received numerous accolades for his teaching and research. He is also the creator of History Lens, a video podcast that contextualizes current issues through a historical lens. Join us as we explore the exciting updates to the Master of Arts in Diplomacy and Global Security degree and what it means for our students. Well, welcome to the Reef, Russell, Jon, and Andrea. We're excited to have you guys with us today, and we're going to talk about the revamped Master of Arts in Diplomacy and Global Security, which is a program that's gotten an overhaul here at HPU. Maybe we could start with, Russell, maybe tell us a little bit about the program and the rationale for the shift in the structure and the naming of the program.
Yeah, so the Masters in Diplomacy and Global Security is a 33-credit interdisciplinary degree. And so the revamping, we've given it a more contemporary national security and international relations focus. It's a program that's designed to appeal to a wide range of individuals interested in careers, both in the private and public sectors, in the knowledge economy of the 21st century, in international relations, in national security, defense studies, intelligence studies, security studies, a wide range of potential career paths make this degree a particularly attractive proposition.
What makes the program really stand out? When you think about the core classes and electives, what really sets it apart now from other programs that students might consider?
Yes, so in terms of the changes we made, one of the things that we introduced is that we've introduced within the electives opportunities for students to add specific concentrations. So if they complete 2 or 3 electives, they can add concentrations in areas such as international human rights, conflict, warfare and society, homeland and international security, diplomacy and statecraft, and contemporary security studies. And these concentrations will appear on a degree transcript. And so this is micro-credentialing. This is adding additional areas of specialized study and knowledge that are particularly advantageous for graduates in the highly competitive knowledge economy of the 21st century.
And what kind of students, or in terms of career paths, what does this set you on a trajectory to do once you've obtained the degree? So I'm interested to hear about the career path, but then also the types of students and the types of majors at the undergrad level that many come in with.
Right, so second question first, types of students. We have a very eclectic range of students. We get traditional graduate students straight out of undergraduate. We get international students, about 15% of our students are international. We get active duty military, we get veterans, we get a lot of adult learners who are already professional practitioners seeking to revamp or expand their professional skill sets. So we attract a very diverse group of students. And that is the biggest advantage of the program. I think Jon and Andrea would agree with me, is the diversity of our student body, incredibly diverse. And so the classroom is always a very entertaining place to be in, because you have people all kinds of backgrounds. We have a lot of students who bring extensive professional experience into their seminars to share with their peers, and so that creates a very diverse and exciting learning environment for students to be in. In terms of career paths, again, very eclectic. So we have graduates who go on to almost everything and anything. Obviously, it's a degree that would exclude careers in the hard sciences. So we're not going to have a molecular biologist or nuclear physicist come out of the program. But graduates go on to a wide range of humanistic and social science related careers. In defense, intelligence studies, in international relations. We have diplomats, we have professional historians, we have university professors, we have practicing lawyers. We have at least 6 of our graduates are CEOs of their own corporations and companies that they established. So the program helps to teach important administrative and time management and negotiating skills that enable graduates to pursue a wide range of careers, particularly those in the defense and contemporary global affairs. So lots of students go on to work for NGOs and IGOs around the world, and both domestically in the United States, go into federal service, work for various federal agencies, Homeland Security, CIA, State Department, FBI, and a lot go on to work in private sector, in research, knowledge economy professions. Half a dozen of our graduates are associates at Booz Allen Hamilton, for example. So a wide range, very wide range of career paths. It's a degree that really doesn't close off too many career paths, and that's I think is a really very attractive feature of the degree.
Yeah, I can see just, in terms of the doors that this degree opens in terms of career pathways, and it does seem to present just a myriad of options that give students flexibility in what they want to do once they graduate. Jon and Andrea, I want to bring you into the conversation, and maybe Andrea, we could start, with your perspective on the revamp, and what was your observation as the program was getting, an overhaul, and you had an opportunity to be involved in that process.
Yeah, I'm really excited about the changes because I think they're adapting to what our student needs and wishes are about. There's such a changing environment of the things that we're talking about in international relations and diplomacy, especially like environmental security, climate change, human rights, international conflict, and the dynamics of those continue to change. And so I think that our new program is much more reflective of that, and it's and when you're in our classroom, whatever class you might be taking, you're going to see that reflected in the student population as well. So one of the times that I was teaching, actually, I had a student who had served as a translator when there were negotiations going on with North Korea in the 1990s. So he had been with Madeleine Albright's team. And so some of the things that we talk about in class, our students are actually able to discuss their firsthand experience, especially, our veteran community who's been especially involved with in Iraq or Afghanistan or deployed all over the world. And so we're talking about these very contemporary, important issues, and they are speaking from firsthand experience. And so we're able to get an environment unlike you really see other places, especially being here in Hawaii, because we have such a large defense community and those involved in the military. But we also have, people who are representatives from other countries. We've had people from Fiji, we've had people from South Korea, especially Philippines, like all sorts of different dynamics all brought together in this classroom to really see the current impacts of the topics that we're talking about.
Jon, do you see the value, I imagine, in bringing together now the diversity of students in the cohort, and see that as a major advantage of the program, to be able to gain different perspectives from students with maybe different academic histories and maybe different career pursuits?
Yeah, I mean, so we enroll students with a lot of different, from a lot of different backgrounds and history, political science, international studies, international relations, just a very broad spectrum of students come in. One of the interesting things right now is I have a student who's he's a diplomat with South Korea, and he's just taking his leave, to get this degree in our program. And he brings such an interesting perspective. I mean, we were talking about the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and he was talking about how this fit into his training as a diplomat, and then he can reflect that back with the rest of the students. So it's really exciting to have students who have this kind of experience and background, practical experience in this kind of stuff. So, I have a student who was a high school teacher, a social studies teacher, and she's so skilled at delivering content and picked up the content of the course so quickly that I put her into one of my other classrooms. And she taught part of a course on sustainability and climate change. And it just kind of blew me away how skilled she was. So the students bring a lot of skills to the table. We even have a student who actually generously offered a grant to other students in the program. And to researchers in the program. So it's a very cool place for me to be an instructor, I can tell you that.
Have you seen, is there a common sort of core of undergraduate majors that you've started to see, come to the program, or is it really a diversity of subjects and majors that they've studied at the undergrad level?
Yeah, I mean, from our own students, history, international studies, international relations, Russell and Andrea, I'm sure you have other, there are others out there.
Political science and international studies are two, and history, and we also have the BA and DMS are all perfect trajectories for students who want to continue into a lot of the training that they're getting in undergrads will translate really well into the master's program. But you do not have to be from that background. And we have students from all sorts of different backgrounds as well. We have one right now who has a background in nutrition. And so he was trying to think, how can I tie this in? And so we're looking at international trade and GMOs and how that affects trade policies and diplomacy. So he's able to take this kind of interest that maybe we don't get as often and see how international relations really shapes so many of the things that we do and maybe hadn't thought about before. So he's able to take his interest in nutrition and now relate that to development aid and GMO policies. And so it's really interesting to see that. So it works for a lot of different types of majors and backgrounds.
That's not a major that you would expect to progress into this type of a program. But I think it speaks to just the diversity of students that, you'd interact with, which create just a much more, meaningful cohort to study with. And, for our listeners that aren't familiar with the program structure, is it on ground, online, hybrid? But, what are the modality options for the program?
Right. So the program is 33 credits. Again, it's a practitioner-oriented program. So our seminars are once a week, 3-hour night seminars. And then we additionally run a portion of our programming online or in hybrid format, partly face-to-face and partly online. The structure is 6 credits of core courses, so 2 core courses. One is an introduction to diplomacy and international relations. The other one is an introduction to the disciplines of diplomatic history and military history. So those are 6 core foundational credits. And that's why we accept students from a wide range of social science and humanities disciplines. Anthropology and sociology are also undergraduate degrees that we get students from as well, in addition to all the other ones mentioned. Then we have seven elective courses, and we have then a capstone of a minimum of 6 credits. So, and in those 7 electives, you can take those from courses in diplomatic history, in military history, in international relations, in strategic and security studies, and in sustainability. And we have 38 courses on the books for this program. So that's a great deal of variety. And this is the thing that really makes our program stand out from other national competitors. So if you compare it to one of our major peer competitors, they have a single elective course in their degree program, and students have a choice of one course out of a choice of 2. We have 7 electives out of a choice of 38. And the consequence of that is that essentially every single graduate of the program is going to graduate with an individualized program, one that's going to be different from anyone else. And this program is very much tailored to be very flexible, to allow students to take coursework that makes sense to them, that pursues their own professional and personal goals. We have, unlike many of our competitors, we have no sequencing of courses. So you don't have to do the core courses first before you can move on to the electives, because we understand that our kinds of students are all over the world at all different times and places, and they need to be able to take the course that they want to take and need to take when they're able to take it. So we try to make this degree as flexible as possible for working adults and for professional practitioners. We're very experienced in dealing with the challenges that come. We're trying to navigate a graduate degree whilst being a full-time employed professional. And we also have an exceptional career placement track record that we are exceedingly proud of.
Now, you mentioned the program includes a capstone project. Can you have any really interesting capstone projects really stand out when you think back, through the history program? What comes to mind in terms of some very interesting capstones?
Yeah, well, we have 3 capstone options. So we have, again, flexibility. We have a traditional thesis, and then we have a professional option, which is students produce a professional portfolio. This is a very useful career tool to help give you an advantage in the knowledge economy marketplace. That's a professional portfolio and a shorter professional paper. And then we also have our newest option, which is a polished article. The student writes a high quality piece for publication. So we have, for example, we have a Army legal officer, for example, who wrote a professional paper on the laws of war as they apply to unmanned aerial vehicles, and he got that published in a professional military education journal, and that launched his career. He is now a high-flying JAG for the US Army. He tours the country. He's one of the Army's leading experts on the legal ramifications of unmanned aerial vehicles. So doing this degree, publishing that article, launched his professional career and has taken him to the heights of his profession.
I know, Jon, I know you're both a professor of and a student of and a lover of history. There's such a rich history and tradition of, diplomacy, military, global security in this region of the world. From your point of view, what makes Hawaii Pacific University a special place to pursue a program like this, given our geography and the strategic importance of the Asia Pacific area?
Yeah, so of course, this is where the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor took place, and the Pacific War commenced. But there's a significant backstory there, and I try to capture some of that in a course I teach called American Cultural Diplomacy, and this is an unusual course. It's I think it's like a value-added course to the program because it looks at diplomacy from the viewpoint of culture, of unofficial diplomats, and of nations actually using culture as a product to generate interest in their aims and their agendas. So cultural diplomacy has been very important in the Asia Pacific region. In fact, before World War II, there was a group that was established here in 1925 called the Institute of Pacific Relations, which their goal, they were cultural diplomats, and their goal was to create a more peaceful Pacific. And it didn't work out at all, actually. it reemphasized tensions between the United States and Japan, and so it ended in war. But yeah, I think the lessons you can pull from this kind of a unorthodox approach to diplomacy is that sometimes this kind of diplomacy is the only kind you can do if there are other kinds of tensions and the official diplomacy doesn't work out. So we can offer that kind of different perspectives, I think is a good way to kind of say it kind of generally.
I would also add it's where the headquarters for Indo-PACOM, Indo-Pacific Command, is at, and so we have the presence of all military branches here, but it really is the headquarter of the strategy of the U.S.'s Indo-Pacific policy. This is where the decisions are happening, and so we are, the state of Hawaii is often hosting high-level diplomats, delegations from all over the world. And we also have students who are like doing internships at places like, Asia Pacific Center for Security Studies, and they're able to engage directly with a lot of these representatives from different countries. And there's other places that our grads have worked, like Pacific Forum or even East-West Center, that gives them this opportunity. And so given the geostrategic importance of Hawaii, they're really able to get right in the thick of all of this important decision-making and see it firsthand in many cases.
Andrea, because of that strategic importance, do the courses and does the focus, ultimately of the program really, focus more towards, the Asia Pacific Rim, or is it truly global? And you're looking at, diplomacy and world, security issues really all over the world.
I think it certainly, given our location, it certainly tends to go heavily towards Asia Pacific, but it's certainly not all that we do, because when we're talking about strategic issues, this is the entire world. It's an interconnected world. And even how the Department of Defense defines Indo-Pacific is incredibly broad. It includes parts of, South America and all the way over to parts that we might consider the Middle East, for example. But, the types of stuff that we're teaching and what our students are studying, that is all over the world. I have, supervised student papers or thesis options on like the political dynamics of Belarus. We've done an issue, I've done a student thesis, supervised a student thesis on Arctic security, for example, which is increasingly going to be important with like the impacts of climate change. One on like Mexican history and like Mexican political resistance. And so we really do have a global focus. And of course, people who are here, their interests do lean heavily towards Asia Pacific, but that's certainly not the only thing that we would cover. The only other thing I would add is because of, again, being an island, and islands are often heavily impacted by climate change, is another thing is we have a lot of students who are interested in things like sustainability and climate change and all of these issues. And so our students can pursue things related to that from a security standpoint, for example, like international maritime boundary laws and how that might be impacted by, changing maritime boundaries. Like, what does it mean? Like that your baseline has shifted. What does that mean for international law? And like, where's, open and where's your own boundary? So these are things that also like students, even with like a marine science background, might be interested in as well.
Very interesting. Are you even starting to take on, issues of, as exploration and military conflict extends into space? Is that becoming a part of the discussion now? I imagine, we're not far away from having to wrestle with those issues of things that extend, more, into orbit and beyond, the physical limitations of the planet.
Sure, yeah. I mean, I teach a course on strategy, and one of the things that we talk about is, does strategy fundamentally differ in different domains of conflict? And so we have a conversation. Does space conflict essentially represent a new dimension of war, or is it simply an extension of aerial combat at a significantly much higher level? And so absolutely, a variety of courses we discuss the implications of the militarization of space, courses on intelligence, of course, satellite and access to satellite information is absolutely essential to most of intelligence gathering these days. So the strategic significance of space is increasing and will continue to increase. And that's why we have a global perspective, because what we say to our students is that, we understand where today's hot flashpoints are, but none of us have any idea where tomorrow's hot spots are going to be. So we encourage our students to get as global a perspective as possible, because, 10 years from now, 20 years from now, who knows where the world's greatest points of tensions are going to be. They may be the same as they are today, or they may be in entirely new areas. So we very much encourage our students to get as global a perspective as possible.
And I know a lot of, students these days and teaching methodologies bring to bear, skills-based learning, real-world experience, simulations, for example. Are there opportunities for things beyond classroom theory, for example, in this program, that, things that create more of those experiential learning opportunities for students in this area?
Yes, there are. So I teach another course called Oil, History, Security, and Sustainability. And last spring, when I was teaching this course, I had a student who developed a simulation on oil in the South China Sea conflict. And it was incredibly fascinating. I mean, there's lots of oil under the South China Sea. The Chinese would say maybe 50 billion barrels of oil under the South China Sea. I don't think there's that much there, but this student was really interested in what if, because the South China Sea is this point of potential flashpoint between the United States and China, what would happen? And you also have about somewhere between 17 to 20% of all the oil in the world is transiting through the South China Sea every day. So what would happen if this tension and the kind of the low level conflict that's going on in the South China Sea spilled into a situation where the South China Sea was actually blocked, where you couldn't get oil through, and where oil installations that are pumping there were damaged in it. So that was incredibly fascinating. And I was a student as much as anyone else in the class of this young man who's so bright and put this together. So yeah, there's definitely opportunities for that.
Interesting.
So in terms of other opportunities, one of the things that we very strongly encourage our students to undertake is study abroad. And we have a proportion of our students study abroad. You can get academic credit for studying abroad, and we have had students study abroad, again, all around the world, across Asia Pacific, in Europe, and in the Middle East. It's a great opportunity. Given our rich history, local history, we try to offer programming that taps into that. So we have a registered student organization, the Association for Diplomacy and Military Studies, and they organize co and extracurricular activities. So among the things that we've organized in the past is a number of sleepovers on the battleship, the USS Missouri, service learning projects, helping to repair and restore the battleship, and also to preserve its archival records. And then in terms of classroom activities, I teach the only university's course on genocide, and they do an activist assignment. So they write letters of protest and various things like that. And last time I taught the class, at the end of the class decided that activism wasn't enough and they wanted to do more. And so collectively, they all agreed that next time I'm going to teach the class, we're actually going to do a international criminal court indictment. The class is going to identify, research, and charge a international actor with the crime of genocide, and the class will conduct a trial of that indicted war criminal. So applying the theory of genocide, understanding the legal precedents, and understanding the legal practice, we're going to put that into practice, and we're going to actually simulate a international criminal court tribunal war crimes trial.
Wow, what an amazing opportunity, to have that sort of a simulation opportunity. What about, contemporary issues, things happening in the world today, like the crisis in the Middle East and the conflict that's going on there? Did those current, geopolitical issues make their way into the classroom as, discussion topics? Are they, formalized and, built into the curriculum? Do you try and create, topical activities around current events?
Oh, absolutely. So we had a roundtable forum discussion on the crisis in the Middle East last year, and we are planning to do one again, hopefully later this semester. So absolutely, we certainly like to put on expert panel to discuss important contemporary security issues. I'm pretty sure when it comes to that international criminal court simulation in my genocide course next time I teach, I'm pretty sure that the current crisis in the Middle East is going to be the subject that will produce the indictment. So,
and what about, even like the U.S. elections? Do conversations come up about, strategies and initiatives being pushed forward by candidates, or do you tend to stay out of the political realm, in terms of the debate today in contemporary politics, and really focus more on issues of strategic importance or more global in nature, as opposed to getting into the political rank? Or I don't know, Andrea, if you have a perspective on that, but that'd be interesting to know a little bit about.
Yeah, certainly in the the class that I teach on international relations, then we integrate all sorts of current topics into it, because a lot of times we're doing really theory heavy material, and I want them to be able to relate current topics as seen through the lenses of these, theories, which are often very heavy and difficult to understand. Like, how would liberalism or realism or constructivism or even feminism talk about these current conflicts around the world? And so because I'm teaching a course on international relations, of course, foreign policy is an important part of that. And so we'll talk about how, different actors, both within the United States and around the world, are going to shape foreign policy. And so, yeah, the election is an important part of that, because we have vastly different foreign policy approaches that will impact how the world is interacting with one another. So we are going to speak through it through a foreign policy lens, especially, and how that might, impact different conflicts around the world, different issues around the world, and how not just the United States, but the rest of the world is curious to see what these results are, because they know that every 2 to 4 years in the United States, there could be a major change in the way that our government is constituted, and they have to also prepare. Like, what's NATO going to think if there's a different president, or how's that going to affect relationship with China or the Pacific? So all of those things really shape the discussions that we're having. So certainly the U.S. election does play a role in what we're talking about.
And I imagine, to the point that you just made, that, we don't see the stability always in U.S. foreign policy, for example, as we see radical shifts in, from administration to administration. We go from strong support of NATO to threatening to pull out of NATO, based on what administration might be, in office at the moment. Does that change the way that you've got to go about educating students? Is a core focus of the program really the emphasis over the word diplomacy and the concept of diplomacy versus political advocacy? So you're really focused on creating, diplomats as opposed to politicians that might have political interest.
We want students to be able to understand a variety of perspectives and then go from there. It's not necessarily about what do you agree with. We're not creating politicians. It doesn't mean somebody might not become one, but that's not our main goal. Our goal is that we want to create critical thinkers, and that when they are exposed to these different theories or lines of thought, that they are able to then better understand the world around them. And so that's what our goal is. It's not to convince them of my perspective or anyone else's perspective. I tell them on day one, my goal here is not to tell you what I believe, but here's what these theories teach and how they apply to different things. And I think the students really appreciate that kind of neutral approach, so that they're able to get a better understanding, and then they form their opinion. And it may change from what they came in having their opinion. So that's what I always encourage them, is to go with this with an open mind, try to understand what these authors or these policymakers are thinking. You understand it, and then you can decide how you feel about it.
I'm going to throw this question out, and I'm interested to get an answer from each of you. But when you think about your history, as a professor and with this program, can you think about, what's the biggest difference that you see in a student in terms of outcomes from when they come into the program and maybe what their initial perspective was, to when they've finished and they've come out and they've gone through the curriculum and they may have a different point of view? But what do you see, as the biggest difference that you see in the evolution of each student when they complete the program? And maybe I could start with you, Jon.
Yeah, I think it's what I would call intellectual maturity, and it's more concrete than that. But so writing skills, the students come in with varying levels of writing capability, and they come out of the program having written a lot and having developed that skill. They really can't matriculate through the program without really improving their writing skills and their ability to communicate in written form. They also are going to improve their oral communication, because we have lots of opportunities for students to get up and speak and to give presentations in a variety of different manners. So, and so the concept of analytical thinking, I think, is, underrated. In addition to the kind of the concrete skills that the program offers, then the students will also become much better analytical thinkers. And the attraction, I mean, we have students employed around, former students employed around the world in so many different professions, including in diplomacy as well. It's, it's the combination of the training, the writing, the speaking, the analytical skills that gives them the basis to kind of reach their goals. So we're not just kind of training people into a vocation in which you train on the thing, right? The thing that you have to do in your kind of your goal field. We're actually training students how to think about the world and how to interact with the world in a variety of ways. And I'll give you my opinion that it's a much richer form of education than more vocational type graduate programs. So.
Yeah, I would totally agree. Russell, what's been your greatest observation of the change that you've seen in students from beginning to end?
Yeah, I would echo Jon and say it's the broadening of the worldview. Most of our students enter the program with a relatively narrow worldview, at least in a globalist perspective, right? They come from whatever cultures they come from, they all have a relatively narrow educational life experiences. Many of them might not have been abroad, may not have traveled much, they might not know much about other countries and other cultures. And absolutely guarantee when they walk out the door with a MA in diplomacy and global security that they are going to have a more global worldview. They will have been exposed to different classes, different professors, different students. They will have studied and understood other cultures' evolutions, other cultural perspectives, and that gives them a broader set of tools to navigate the world that we live in, right? The 21st century, the world is ever shrinking, and to succeed in the knowledge economy of the 21st century, you have to have a globalist perspective, right? You have to have some basic understanding of the world, how the world has got the way that it is, in order to navigate it effectively and succeed. So, as a historian, one thing I always tell to my students, which always surprises them, is that whatever we're talking about in contemporary security challenges or international relations, none of this is new. It's all happened before, somewhere, in some place, in some time, in a similar context. And so my job is to disabuse them of that their sense that everything is novel, and make them understand that this has happened before. And by studying the historical past, they can better understand the world they live in today, and therefore, as a consequence, better navigate the world of tomorrow. And that broadening of perspective is clearly, particularly, I think, for our US military service personnel, it's a profoundly career benefiting experience to have that broadening of worldview. And I'll just give you one example. A few years ago, some years ago now, but you might remember, we had that controversy about the Danish newspapers satirizing the Prophet Muhammad. And when that international crisis was going on, I came into seminar. As I walked into my seminar, I heard two of my students speaking. I had a Egyptian Muslim student, and I had a Danish Lutheran student. As I walked into class and set up, they were talking about that crisis, and their discussion of it was the most meaningful, insightful discussion that I had heard on the subject. So we abandoned the topic for the evening, and we spent the entire evening talking about that crisis and the very many contemporary implications that derive from it. And so that's what we can do. We really can intersect with incredible professional knowledge. Another occasion, I was doing a case study on the Battle of Fallujah in Iraq, and I was using the official Marine Corps after action report. And I had a Marine second lieutenant in the class, and I just randomly picked an operation to highlight a point, and he just starts hopping out of his seat, screaming, "That's not right! That's not right!" And like, "What do you mean that's not right?" He goes, "I was the officer who led that operation, and what you're reading in the after action report is nothing like what really happened. So I said, well, you better come up the front of the class and take over and tell us what really happened. And it was so then we got into a really interesting discussion about how knowledge of military operations is preserved and passed on, and the distortions that can take place in the attempt to preserve and learn lessons from the military past. So connected again to important contemporary themes. But that's the kind of, unprecedented opportunities you can get in our classrooms. And that's why after being here for 24 years, I'm still excited to go into my graduate seminars every time. I'm never bored. Because I never know what's going to happen. Every class is different. Someone's going to say something, some new insight, some new perspective that is new to me. And, that's why I'm a professional educator. I learn alongside my students. I always refer to them as my fellow learners. I never call them students. I call them fellow learners because that's how I see it. I'm learning alongside of them. And that's an incredible privilege to have that opportunity to learn from the professional expertise of so many of our students.
Yeah, it seems like, we hear so much today about students not being students of history and bringing that knowledge forward. And it sounds like the students that move into this program understand the importance of having that intellectual curiosity, being students of history and applying that knowledge so that they can better understand pattern recognition and how things might play out in the future. It seems like that would be a core part of the program. Has that been your experience, and what's really stood out to you in the difference in the student outcomes that you've seen, Andrea?
I would say, to echo what both Jon and Russell said, is that we see this incredible development that happens usually just over a very short period of time. Students often come in with preconceived notions about the world, often very, very narrow viewpoints, and they're exposed to all of these different ideas. And I always tell them, I said, you don't have to agree with it, but you understand it. And so I think once they embrace that approach, we see them leaving with a much more nuanced perspective of the world than what they came in with, especially those who came in like ready to prove why they're right. Then they leave able to provide a much more balanced perspective. And so seeing that transformation happen over such a short period of time, and especially when we live in an incredibly polarizing political environment, I think it's really hopeful to be able to see that we can still be exposed to information, we can learn, and we can acknowledge that our perspective has changed and that we understand things better. And maybe in the past we were wrong. Those are all things that I think is a really important part of intellectual growth that we see with our students and ourselves.
Yeah, it seems that everybody these days could have a little more diplomat in them to reconcile some of these, polarization that we see in the factions and the bubbles that we've created that everybody seems to live in. And this program really seems well suited for creating a very well-rounded, strategically aware professional that can apply more neutral perspectives to get to outcomes that really create outcomes that are better for broader groups and not just folks with specific interests. So Andrea, I know there's a lot of buzz around interdisciplinary programs and how that allows expansion of content and thinking. Is this program structured to be interdisciplinary as well?
This program is incredibly interdisciplinary, and so students can come in from a variety of backgrounds, and they're going to be exposed to all sorts of different methodologies and theories, and people from unique backgrounds, whether that's those with a background in history, political science, security practitioners, the ones who have been out in the field actually making these important security decisions. And so students are going to leave the program having this really unique interdisciplinary background that's allowed them to become really well-rounded in how they understand the world. And I think that's what really makes our program stand out so much compared to others, is just how grounded it is and embraces its interdisciplinarity.
I think one thing we didn't mention about the flexibility of the program is that students can study full-time or part-time. And so this is particularly attractive for our adult learners, that they can study part-time. And we also teach year-round. We teach in the fall and spring 16-week semesters. We also teach in summer, the 2 half-summer semesters, and in the fall 16-week summer semester. So students can study year-round. They want to accelerate degree completion, or they can go the slow route and take one course at a time, if that's all they can manage. And we have students that do that. We have full-time students, we have part-time students. We have students who temporarily are off island, and so we can accommodate that on a temporary basis. So we often have students, military students, who might either start the program or finish this program from a different geographic location, and we're very used to handling that. So we're very adult learner friendly. So the MA in Diplomacy and Global Security is a face-to-face program. We offer, the majority of our programming is offered in face-to-face, one night a week, weekly seminars, night seminars, and we offer a proportion of our coursework either online or hybrid that does allow for students of the program to, for example, to perhaps start or to finish the program as a distance learner.
For our listeners, if they want to learn more about the program or apply, where can they go?
I'm happy to talk to anyone and everyone. I always like to have a conversation with a student who's potentially interested in the program to make sure that they understand the program they're applying for and to make sure it's a good fit for them. One of the reasons why this program is a success is that we try very hard to admit students who are a good fit for the program. And so I'm happy to meet with any prospective student and answer any and all questions that they might have. We have a Facebook page, Diplomacy Military Studies at HPU, that they can join and talk to current students, faculty, and alumni of the program. Students can go to www.hpu.edu and search for the MA in Diplomacy and Global Security.
Well, this has been a fascinating conversation, and I'm glad that we had an opportunity to tell folks more about the program's restructuring and what we see as the value and outcomes that students will achieve having gone through it. So Jon Davidann, Russell Hart, Andrea Malji, I appreciate your time today. And sharing a little bit of your knowledge about the program. And hopefully, as I said, we'll continue to see great student outcomes and continued enrollments in the program grow.
Thanks very much, Jeff.
Thanks, Jeff.